It's been a while since I've just sat down and talked like this for a video. If people like this format, maybe I'll do some more of these. Perhaps this will be the first in a series I'll call The State of Things. Or just talk about the state of things. Something a little slower paced than my usual info dump videos that I try to do. So the first thing to talk about is the redacted. The thing. The thing that I can't talk about until April 11th. Which just happens to work out pretty well because April 11th is a Thursday. And Thursdays are when I upload videos. And since it's a Thursday video, this seems like a pretty good opportunity to unveil the thing. And the thing is, which is hopefully announced by the time I launch this video, and I'm not violating any NDAs or anything, but there's supposed to be an announcement. I'm making this video prior to the announcement from Steam that there is an FPS Fest. I think this might be the first FPS Fest they've done. They've done a number of different fests, Next Fest and all that stuff. But they sent me an invite for KOOK to be on the FPS Fest. So I have been working very hard trying to get KOOK in some semblance of a playable state. To make things even more crazy, the FPS Fest takes place on April 15th, which here in the United States is when taxes are due. So yeah, it's been a crazy time. Madness is a theme not only in the game, but in my life right now. But since I had to tally up all my income for the IRS anyway, we might as well look at some of those numbers. So by far my greatest income came from Twitch, with a total Twitch payout of $2,298.89. And on top of that, also Twitch related was some of the donations that people did on stream, which come to a total of $115.70. And finally, we have my Patreon cash out of $1,613.83. That might be a little bit deceptive though, because it doesn't automatically cash out at a certain period, so I'm not sure when the last time I did the payout thing for that was. So the total becomes $4,028.42. Not bad, actually. I mean, all things considered, that's probably enough to cover a month or two of expenses. Almost covers my mortgage interest of the year. Not quite though. Almost covers the utilities. Just a little shy of that too, but still, gives me more runway than if I weren't doing all that. And speaking of Patreon, let's do a shout out to all my patrons early on in the video. Normally I save this for the end of the video, but let's do, these awesome people deserve some more recognition instead of just being at the end of the video where people ignore it. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot to give for my patrons, so, here's your name on a list. I do appreciate it. Now, on the off chance the IRS audits me and looks at this video for evidence, I will put the caveat out there that I have not double checked these numbers. This is just a first pass of adding everything up. And I'm kind of making this video as a way to procrastinate on actually doing my taxes until the last possible minute. And let's talk about the state of another big thing, Fist of the Forgotten. What's up with that? Have I abandoned it? No. Fist of the Forgotten actually got pretty far with the publisher. I went to GDC a couple years ago, and things were going pretty well with that. And unfortunately, the publisher ended up having to back out because of their investor having some concerns about the risk of a solo developer, and also the Godot engine. I guess that had kind of a compounded effect. It's not something I really considered before, but it is a valid concern. If a project only has one single developer and something happens to that developer, then the project is gone. It's over. And the Godot engine was just, this is not a concern for me personally, but they just never worked with the Godot engine before, and we're not sure about how viable it was to bring to various platforms like the PlayStation and Xbox and all that stuff. But I think Godot is definitely gaining a lot of traction, especially since that whole Unity, several Unity things. I think the latest was the whole charging per download, but a lot of people have been jumping ship, and Godot has been gaining a lot of traction. So that's good. I mean, it's not good for the people using Unity, but it's good for Godot and open source software in general. But yeah, I'm not too concerned about bringing Godot to other platforms because a lot of the core developers founded W4 Games, and that is dedicated to services like porting to different platforms and some cloud services and stuff like that. So I think by the time my game is done, it should be well and thoroughly supported by various platforms, like anything I would need. Failing to get a publisher was not the only reason that I have switched Fist of the Forgotten over to my secondary project and made KOOK my primary project. Being completely transparent, I have not been pulling in the wishlist numbers that I feel are necessary in order for Fist of the Forgotten to have a successful launch. Like, I really don't want to launch a game with less than 10,000 wishlists. Now, I know wishlist numbers are not the be-all, end-all for what is going to indicate the success of your game, but they do provide a really good indication. And I know there's a way you can do like a big marketing push right before the game launch and get some traction that way. But when I'm not pulling in more than like 10 wish lists a day, which I feel like is what I need. Like ideally I would have probably 20 wish lists a day, which would mean when I launch the game, I might get about 10 sales per day of development, and I'm pulling in like less than 10, sometimes less than 5. I'm not sure what the average number is. Every once in a while I can get a spike when it gets featured on a video or put in some kind of event, but I haven't been able to find any kind of marketing strategy that lets me have a sustained number of wish lists like on the regular, which I feel is really important in order to make the game visible when it launches. The other thing that's really been a challenge is finding the target audience. Like, who plays platformers? I mean, sure, there's some niche audience like speedrunners and things, but they tend to play a very specific platformer or a specific set of platformers, and they don't veer away from that very often because they probably don't want to ruin their muscle memory, or they've built up an audience because they play a certain game, and if they play different games, then they start losing their audience. So something like KOOK is a lot easier because my target audience are people who enjoy Quake, and there's still a big community, thriving community, making maps and mods and stuff like that. So I can just hang out with those guys, which I'm already part of that community. I know those people, and I have that target audience, and I can give updates about the game, and people are interested in it, and it's a lot easier to work with that. A lot of people say they want new and unique games, but one thing I feel that is not talked about enough is how difficult it is to market a new and unique thing. Like, if you have something that is a familiar concept, it's much easier to get an audience because there's already audiences built and communities built around certain games or certain aspects of games. And if you're making something that's a little off the beaten path, it's a lot of extra work to try and find that audience or that niche. And so Fist of the Forgotten doesn't really fit in a lot of the categories that a lot of even like platformers have, because it's not a Metroidvania. It's not like your typical subcategories of a platformer. It's kind of like a high level, it's a platformer, but it's not a Metroidvania, it's not a roguelike or roguelite or all of these other sub things. It's a platformer with a big focus on momentum, and there's really not that many games out there that are quite like that. So I've been really struggling with actually finding that target audience. I'm sure there's people out there that will really love it, but how do I find them? I've been in the past working on it like one day a week as my secondary project. I know lately I've been like laser focused on KOOK trying to get this demo ready for the FPS Fest, but I'll probably go back to working on Fist of the Forgotten once a week. And my hope is that it will garner some wish lists in the background, and maybe somebody will grab the demo and it will magically hit that target audience, or maybe I'll get some good feedback. I just turned around to see you following me. What are the odds of that? Somebody followed while I was recording on OBS, just out of the blue. So, Flare the Bird, thank you for the follow. You get to be featured on a YouTube video. Cool. What I was trying to say is maybe I'll get some really good feedback from the demo that will help identify the little missing hook or something about Fist of the Forgotten that's just making it not quite connect with people, because I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect. It's just like there's so much in the game that's cool, but there's just something that's not quite there in order to really grasp people. And I'm hoping that I can figure that out, or figure out how to get the audience that really wants that game. And if we can match that game with that target audience and everyone's like really happy and I get a bunch of sales and they get a cool game that they like, that would be amazing. But it might take some time for that to happen, or maybe a similar game needs to come out to get a lot of traction that I can kind of bounce off the popularity of that. I don't know, but it's going to be my secondary project for an indeterminate amount of time. I was really hoping to get another Fist of the Forgotten devlog out before I kind of officially announced my transition from Fist of the Forgotten to KOOK as my primary project here on YouTube. But it has been a Sisyphean effort to try to get that thing done. Like this devlog was started back in 2021, and I just have not Like, it's so hard to find time to work on a devlog while also working on a game. I don't know how some YouTubers do it. Like, there's some YouTubers out there that put out these really elaborate devlog videos, and they go into like not just all of the things they did, but have like videos of them working on the things and then like explaining the bugs and showing the bugs off. Every time I try to do that in a video, it's like, well, I had this crazy bug and then I fixed it, and then I have to go like find what I changed in the code and reintroduce the bug and then show the bug and then reapply the fix or revert the bug or whatever and show the fix and doing all that stuff. It's like, it's so much work. Hats off to all those YouTubers out there that do that. I don't know how you pull that off. But one thing I think that has helped me personally actually get some video content out is this new schedule that I have, where no matter what, I try to get a video out on Thursday. So at least there's one new video a week. It may just be like a little short or some little quick compilation of old Twitch clips or something like that. But at least I'm getting something out there. And speaking of Twitch clips, that content is even further behind than my devlogs, because I'm still back in like 2018, 2019 on those Twitch clips. But those compilations are fun to put together. It's neat to look back and reminisce about those crazy old times using Blender 2.79 or whatever it was. Actually, I do think I'm at least caught up to the point where I'm using Blender 2.8 in my Twitch clips now, so it's not quite as ancient, but it's crazy. I don't know. At least this schedule helps me put new stuff out there on the regular. I think another thing that makes these devlogs so difficult is that I'm working on so many little things. Like, I work so incrementally, and I have like 100+ different little things that I'm working on, as opposed to working on one or two big things that I can have a big devlog update about. So I'm working on art assets and music and sound and new enemies, and it keeps adding up, and each subject change is like a new little video that I have to make. And I think with KOOK, even though I'm using a similar development approach for the devlogs, what I'm going to do is make them about a particular topic. Like, I might do a devlog about the enemy design. I might do another devlog about the rendering tech that I'm using to make per texel shaders, and how I'm doing the level design and stuff like that, where I kind of consolidate a lot of info from a larger period of time into one specific topic. And then that way I have a little more focus, and it's a little easier to make the devlog without having just a shotgun spattering of 1,000 different things in one devlog video. So I guess the question you guys might have now is, what are the next steps for KOOK? Am I looking for a publisher? What's the plan with that? And I honestly don't know if I want to go with a publisher or not. My plan initially was to get KOOK up to the level that I could work on presenting it to a publisher and get some funding and whatnot. But I'm kind of thinking that maybe if I manage to get enough traction outside of publishers that I will not need a publisher, I could potentially go into early access or do some crowdfunding, or maybe manage to finish the game within the runway that I have available, since I'm just working off of savings. But I am getting a little bit, like I talked about earlier, from Twitch and some other things. That's not quite enough to cover living expenses, but I do have a good bit of savings still. I'm very fortunate in that regard. Sadly, KOOK has not exactly been blowing Fist of the Forgotten out of the water as far as wishlist numbers go, so maybe the wishlist rate has been more about my skill with marketing than anything about the game itself. But I also have not put a demo out for KOOK and have not put it through any fests, so it'll be interesting to see what happens after this FPS fest, if I get a big influx of interested people, or if it sort of has a spike and then fizzles out like normally happens when putting a game up on the Steam festivals. I do think in general there tends to be a stronger interest in KOOK just from the viewers on Twitch and whatnot than for Fist of the Forgotten, so that's pretty promising. It's also much more in my wheelhouse because I grew up playing Quake like back in the 90s, and I grew up modding, and I've been a lot more involved with that community. A lot of you might be familiar with Digital Paint Paintball 2 and maybe even the Quake World Paintball mod, so it's something that I've been doing for years, and I had concerns when I was first making my first solo indie game that a first-person shooter would be a little too ambitious, but as things have turned out, Fist of the Forgotten, which was supposed to be kind of a simple platformer, ended up becoming, I think, more ambitious than a game like Quake is, because of all of the cutscenes and storytelling and stuff that I was trying to do, which is very animation heavy, very time intensive. So for KOOK, I'm kind of doing a 180 and saying any kind of story stuff, I could just throw some text up there. We're not going to deal with all these cutscenes. Whereas Fist of the Forgotten, I was trying to do it like completely dialogue free, trying to convey emotion through pictures and animation and music and stuff, which is way more challenging, way more ambitious, even if the gameplay itself is a little bit simpler and a 2.5D platformer type scenario. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is that in a 2D play space, the level design actually ends up being a lot more difficult. That kind of surprised me. You would think it would be easier. You're only dealing with 2 dimensions. But when you have a full 3D space, you can get a lot more leverage out of the assets that you use, because you can go above an object, you can go under an object, you can go to the left of the object, you can go to the right of the object, you can go inside of the object. And in 2D, it's just kind of like, well, you can go above or below it. You can't go around. And so there's a lot of time spent building these assets that you're only using a small portion of as far as the gameplay goes. Also, I've learned so much during the development of Fist of the Forgotten as far as making and animating models and 3D and all that kind of stuff. So it actually seems like it might be viable to build a 3D first-person shooter in a reasonable period of time and hopefully make it profitable so that I can keep doing this. Okay, I think I've rambled on enough. Let me know if you guys like this longer form, more casual content, and if you want to see more of it. The downside is if I make more of these videos, then I've got less time to go through my huge backlog of devlog stuff and Twitch highlight clips and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, bye-bye. Oh wait, no, I need to bring out my my old classic outro.